One of the most common strategies in the sports card investing world is to speculate on player performance. In other words, to bet on a player by buying their cards before the season starts, and if they have a good year, you can usually sell their cards for a profit. Now, it sounds easy, it sounds logical, but it's actually a lot harder in practice than you might think because it's difficult to predict the future consistently. And so there's a strategy I've picked up over the years that I like quite a bit better because it's a lot more predictable and it leads to more consistent results. And it all has to do with understanding the market patterns and being able to leverage those patterns to turn a profit. And so I like to call this the seasonal market swing play. And so all we're doing here is we're trying to understand what are the types of players that the crowd is going to be in on going into next season. And then we buy at the right time of year so we can get out ahead of the crowd. And then when the crowd jumps into the market and they're looking for those players, we've already got a stack of their cards ready to go, ready to sell. And a lot of this happens before the season ever begins. So think about it this way. Instead of speculating on the players, we're actually speculating on the speculators. Not bad, huh? And so in this video, I'm going to break down how I think about the selling side of playing the seasonal swing strategy. And when do I sell? How do I approach the time leading into the season? What selling format do I use? Some of the differences between common cards versus rare cards, and a whole bunch of other tactical tips that you can use to level up your strategy if you ever use this play yourself. Let's dive right into it. Baseball selling season is almost here. And so, how do we approach the selling season? Now that we've bought our inventory, we've got good deals at the end of the calendar year here on some baseball inventory. What's the actual approach as we think about when to turn around and actually sell this stuff and lock in our profits? So, let's talk through this together. And I'll give you my best take on how to maximize your chances at success here. Here's what we'll cover on this one. So, first and foremost, I just want to review the core approach behind buying season, selling season, just playing the seasonal swing strategy in general. And then we'll talk about the timing of how to go about listing. When do we want to do this? We'll talk about the listing format to consider using. I'll share my best practices for this and also how different card types impact the selling strategy. I think depending on whether you have something that's more common or something that's rarer, that may impact the way that you want to approach looking at selling here. And then just a couple of cautions, considerations, food for thought for you as a way to wrap this one up. So let's dive into it. Core approach here. So again, just to review, to buy during the buying season while the MLB hits its relative low point for the year. So again, the whole point of this strategy is we're looking at where is the crowd's attention, and then we're focusing on the stuff that they're not paying attention to. So September, October, November, and December for the baseball market, as the season wraps up, as a lot of teams are eliminated from the playoffs, oftentimes we'll see cards dip, core cards of core players end up going cheaper than they've been all season for no real reason other than that people have turned their attention elsewhere. And that is our opportunity to buy at a discount. Step two is to sell during the season to lock in, sell during selling season. Let me be clear there, to lock in profits before the season begins. And that's the key is once we get into the season, then no longer is it the excitement and the hype that drives values. It's like 90-10 based on performance at that point. It's way more skewed to actual on-field performance. And the challenging part here is it's not just playing well, as you all know, that makes card values rise. It's playing well compared to the card market's expectations. So when the market sets these huge, lofty expectations for all these guys, very few players are actually able to meet those expectations, let alone exceed them. And that's why we oftentimes see a lot more players fall once the season begins rather than rise. And so by selling before the season begins, yes, we are passing on the potential upside. If someone goes off, they have a great year, they exceed all expectations, their card values probably will rise and we'll miss out on that. But what's nice is we're passing the risk to the buyer as well. So while we're getting rid of the upside, the more important piece here is that we get rid of the risk. And that's what we're doing to lock in profits while the money's available before the season begins. Once you get into the season, it's a different ball game. Okay, it's more of a gamble. We can't control our own destiny nearly as much at that point because we have to rely on the player's performance. So this is the core approach here. This is how we do it. Please note, there are no guarantees. As you know, anytime that we're investing in cards, there is risk here. there is a chance that we can lose money even on this play, even if we buy at the right time and sell at the right time. Not every player, not every card is going to follow the same pattern, but a lot of the key cards of key players do. And that's why there is a long history of this trend in the market, which to me is what makes it a really solid calculated risk that we're taking here, because the upside outweighs the downside in most cases. Meaning, if you think about just where is everyone's attention in, October, you're just not thinking about baseball prospects necessarily in October and November. You're thinking about football, you're thinking about basketball, you're thinking about the upcoming holidays. And so when you think about it that way, when are you going to be more excited about a Jackson Chourio card? In October, or when you're like 6 months away, the season's just ended, or in February, in March, when the season's just a couple weeks away and everyone brings their attention back to the market and is getting excited about the new baseball season, right? It's no comparison really. The second one is where typically we're going to see a lot more attention going to that player, and where the attention goes, the cash flows. I just made that up, so I hope that you can enjoy my stupid isms here. But all right, timing. Let's talk about this one next. So we have our selling and buying timing guide here. Again, we want to be buying typically September through December. You always have to do your research. You got to make sure you're still getting a solid deal. Some players are still going to rise in September and October with the playoffs and everything, but a lot of guys don't. A lot of guys are dipping at that point in time and continue to dip throughout the end of the calendar year. And then once we get into the new year, we're into January here. What about when we get to February and March, as the excitement starts to build for the season? That's typically where you see card values rise. And I will be clear, January is kind of this transition month where if you're careful, you can still find deals here and there on certain players, but it's also a time when a lot of cards will start to climb. So you got to pay attention to the market. But that's generally what we're looking at as far as timing goes. Now let's get into the specifics here. So selling season, I want to be clear, this is an inexact science. It's not like there's just like a single magical date where on this date we're going to hit the peak for every player. It doesn't work that way. It's real supply and demand that drive values here. So it's going to be different for each player based on popularity, based on their projectability, based on their team situation, the opportunity in front of them this year, especially for a lot of those like younger guys, the prospects. Are they going to have a chance to make their debuts? For the rookie guys that are second year guys coming out of their rookie seasons, are those guys going to take that next step forward? Like, that's the type of thing that people are looking at here. And then it's going to be different for each card too. So, while we see this trend across the board for all different types of cards, it's going to be some cards that rise higher and faster than others based on rarity, based on popularity. There's all sorts of factors here based on grade, all kinds of things that can influence this. So just want to be clear. You might say, hey, why isn't my card rising? That might be that you picked the exact right player. You just didn't get the right card that climbs quite as high and fast as the other cards of that player that are rarer or more popular, whatever it is. So this is something to just keep an eye on, but it's going to differ based on each player and situation here. All right, let's talk about specifically like basically a calendar here. So in January, I think the main action item that I like to do is to just start tracking values of the cards that I have and of similar cards. So it might be that, maybe I've got this Jackson Holiday Refractor Auto PSA 10. Maybe none of these are selling, but I'm seeing a lot of base PSA 10 autos that are starting to trend up. That gives me a clue that his market is heating up. And even though I haven't seen exact comps of this card, it might be a time that I want to consider listing my card. Now, even in January, I know that selling season is technically February and March. That is our best estimate for when the market will be most likely to peak. But January, there are opportunities to sell stuff still. Like, the market will start to heat up for a lot of these guys in January. It may not peak in January, but you may have an opportunity to flip for a profit. So if you see an opportunity, list, get your cards out there, put them up there when appropriate. For example, if I paid $100 for a card and I want to sell it for $150, maybe I see the comps climb to $125, then another one sells for $140. Even if it's January, why wouldn't I list the card for $150? I don't really see a reason to wait if you have an opportunity to win now. And so it's all about figuring out, all right, what do we actually want to get out of this card? And then when it gets there, just sell it and move on to the next one. And that's the whole point. Lock in that profit, take the money, be happy, and move on to the next one. And now in January, I like to list cards as buy it nows and field offers. I usually save auctions for a little later in the selling season here, and we'll talk about that in just a second here. So February, this is the schedule that I will be using for the majority of the cards that I'm selling this year. So February 1st or very close to that date, I'll be listing the cards via buy it now, and I will personally be using best offer because I like to be able to negotiate a little bit with people. I also like to look at what is the target price that I want to sell this card for, and then I'll list it for 25 to 35% above that price, which gives me some room to negotiate. It gives me some room to field offers and see what's out there. If I'm listing as a strict buy it now without the offer option, I'll go lower. I want to be a little bit more, basically, I want to be exactly at my target price. I don't want to waste people's time. No one's going to pay 1,000 times over market value. So just be realistic here. But February 15th. So I give it a couple weeks, and then I'm going to drop the price if it's still up for sale. I haven't made any progress towards selling that card yet. I'm going to drop the price by about 10% and get it to the point where it's about 15 to 25% above my target price. So we're getting a little bit more aggressive on our price the closer to the season we move. So early selling season, I want to be aspirational. I want to try to maximize what I get out of this card. As we move closer and closer to the season, we want to get more aggressive to try to inspire more action, more offers on our cards. And the goal, of course, is to sell for as much as possible, but we do want to make sure we get out of that card before the season begins. And that is the reason why I will progressively lower my price the closer to the season we actually get. Once we get into March, on March 1st, I will drop the price again to be only 5 to 10% above my target price. On March 16th, if I'm still holding that card, a lot of the times, unless I'm willing to speculate on performance, I want to be sending that card to auction at this point in time. I'm giving up control over the price, but it's going to make sure that I get out of that card before the season begins. And again, the exception here is you can continue with the buy it now listing, field offers, do what you want. If you want to speculate on performance into the season, just know that it's risky. There is big upside if you're right. I've made tons of money on guys when I've speculated and been correct, but I've also lost big when I've been wrong. And so there's big downside. And I will say, I do anticipate, just like most years, that there will be more players that fall after the season begins than those who rise. So just be careful. As far as listing format goes, let's talk about this. So auctions are for if you want the sure money, if you want to control when the card sells. Fixed price or buy it now, and this includes the best offer option of listing as well. This is if you want more money. And typically what we'll see is that the buy it now style of listings will go for more money. A lot of reasons for this. Auctions, you need 2 buyers to bid up the price. Fixed price, you only need 1. Fixed price, you have control over the card and what it sells for. Auction, you do not. So a couple of reasons there, but when we look at this and kind of break it down, again, buy it now is if you want control over the price. Auctions if you want to control the time of the sale. So my approach, best case, again, trying to maximize the sale using buy it now. I like to negotiate via best offer. It kind of gets the buyer involved in the conversation. And once you kind of open that door, I found a lot more success with negotiating over best offer and still getting my price, as opposed to just listing as a buy it now where it's kind of super transactional. Sometimes just sending a little message here and there to the buyer as you're negotiating can help smooth over and make a deal actually happen. So, and then of course we lower the price as we move closer to the season. Worst case, again, when we get to late March here, mid-late March, we can move the card at auction to guarantee that the sale happens before the season begins. Now, what about different types of cards and how do we approach a rare card versus a more common card? So let's start with common cards, and I'll give you the idea here that typically it's fine to list earlier. And the reason for this is there's no real reason, or there's not as much risk anyway for exposure fatigue. And so exposure fatigue is this idea that if we put rare cards out there, stuff that people don't see very often, and we do it too early, like we mistime it and put it at a time where people aren't actually ready to buy yet, we're kind of like blowing all the excitement way too soon. And then people get used to seeing it. It's the Adam Sandler movie, though, we wasted the good surprise on you. And then by the time the actual peak of the market hits, people aren't as excited about that card anymore. If I'm selling, I want that shock and awe value when I list my card. But with common cards, you don't really have that so much. So I'm thinking about cards that are, say, numbered to 50 or less that are going to be in the more rare category. Depending on the card, depending on the pop, depending on the grade, all this stuff, you might see cards that are not as rare, but that have a lower pop or something, or that there aren't as many of them listed if it's an older card. Some of those can fall into that category where you can overexpose the card as well. So it's not a crazy issue at this time of year. You're fine. You're not going to completely ruin everything if you list a card too soon, but it's just something that I try to be mindful of and not letting my cards sit too long if they are rare cards. The other thing to consider here, it can't sell if it's not for sale. So if we're not putting our stuff up for sale, we're not going to sell it. Like, it's great to have nice inventory and stuff, but you have to actually take that step of putting it out there in order to sell it. Now, there will also generally be more sales when it comes to common cards, and this can be either helpful or hurtful. It's likely going to make it easier to sell the card because there's increased confidence from the market to buy that card at a specific price because we've got a bigger price history. We've got, say 5, 10, 15 comps in the last couple of weeks. That gives people confidence that they know roughly about the price that they should be paying for that card. On the flip side, if there are fewer sales, it's a lot harder to determine the price. And so this is one of the benefits of common cards is you have increased liquidity because of that confidence a buyer is going to have using the comps to help them determine what the actual value of that card is. And now this could also hurt our chance to profit though. So it's a little bit of a trade-off. We get that increase in liquidity, but we have less control over value because if there's 10 of these things out there, I've got to compete with 10 other listings. So that's the challenge here in having more common cards is you don't have as much say over the price. Let's talk rarer cards. So I usually wait a little bit longer to list these than I will for common cards. So some of my more common cards, I'll probably end up throwing up in late January, and just there's not really a reason to wait too much longer than that. For some of the rarer stuff, I'm looking at, definitely into February, maybe even mid-February before I really put this stuff out there. It kind of depends on the market, though. If there's not a whole lot out there, I might want to list something anyway and get it out there a little bit sooner. Again, it can't sell if it's not for sale, but there is that exposure fatigue risk if we list too soon. So again, I want buyers to feel urgency when the card is listed. I want them immediately saying, oh, I got to get my hands on this thing. Let me put in an offer right now. The goal, of course, is I want to list it a little bit closer to that expected peak. So specifically getting it up in February rather than January. The downside here is that if again, it can't sell if it's not for sale. So we're taking a little bit of a risk by not putting it out there as early. And also with rarer cards, there are usually fewer sales. So if we look at this, the kind of the inverse of the common cards, it could make it harder to sell because there's less confidence from a buyer that they understand what the value of the card is. They're kind of guessing a little bit more if the most recent sale was months ago. So this is where using similar cards of the same player or similar cards of similar players to help kind of triangulate around value can be a really beneficial tactic to use as a seller. So in the back of your mind roughly what to expect. But it also makes it easier to dictate the price and have some more control over the value if there aren't as many sales and if there aren't as many options out there. For example, if I've got this Jackson Chourio Gold Wave Topps Chrome PSA 1010 here, I can put this out there. And if I've got the only one on the market, what's someone going to do? Tell me that that I'm overpriced? Then I say, okay, well then, this is my price is my price. You either pay it or that's it, So they've either got to pay your price or not get the card. And that's where you have a little bit more leverage. Let's get into some considerations here and talk through a couple of kind of random things here, but that are all important. We want to first start by figuring out what is a realistic target price that we can expect this card to reach, or at least that we hope that this card reaches. And sometimes I'm looking at past prices. I'm not necessarily looking at the all-time high. I'm never going to assume that the card's going to go back to all-time peak. But if I'm looking at prices from, May, June, July, and they were, say, 40, 50, 60% higher, and the card seemed to fall off for no reason, I don't know if they're going to get all the way back up to those prices, but it's not unreasonable to think that they could get up to, at least some of those prices. And sometimes you'll see cards fly by previous prices, and you'll see an all-time high for some of these guys, especially the younger players and the guys that are taking that leap or that people think are going to take that leap in their second year here. So that's the exciting part about this is we don't actually know where values will go until we get there. The thing is, though, when you have a goal, it helps you stay disciplined. And when the card gets to that target price, sell it. I think one of the things that's hurt me the most over the years is when I get greedy. I see the value rising and I'm like, I really like this player. It's only going up from here. And then I move the goalpost, right? Like I had a sell price in mind, and say I buy a card for $100 and it gets to 200 and that was my target. And then I'm like, I don't know. I think I can get 250. Well, sometimes the card falls back down after it hits your goal, right? So it might go down to 150. And then I'm sitting here feeling like a dummy that I didn't take the money when it was there. So moving the goalposts, it's a recipe for trouble. I always liked thinking about it this way. Like, didn't you say this is the offer that would make you happy? And then you get to that offer and you don't take it. You know what I mean? So this is, again, it helps when you set a little bit of at least a rough target price for what you're hoping to get out of the card from the onset here. And again, we're taking a best guess. You don't always know. We don't know what's going to happen. It's so hard to time the peak. And we don't know it's the peak until we have the benefit of hindsight to look back and say, oh, yeah, I should have sold there instead of holding out longer. Or, oh, shoot, I should have held longer and I sold too early. It goes both ways. And timing the sale is just a challenging thing to master here. So we do the best we can with the information we have, and then we move on. Another consideration, look at the available supply. So let's look at what else is listed on the market and ask yourself, like, if I'm a buyer for this card, is it easy to find a great card of your guy? Is it the only one if you put yours out there? Would it be the only of that card on eBay? Sometimes that can be a real advantage. How are the others priced? So for example, if I've got a card that I want to get $200 out of, but there's 10 of them that are listed for anywhere from $150 to $175, me listing my card for $200, it's probably not going to get a whole lot of action if there's a bunch of cheaper options. So you got to kind of take a little bit of this into consideration. I may list my card earlier if I would have the only one on eBay. I may hold off if there are 10 copies of the card listed below my target price. Now, when it comes to mindset on when to sell, I'd rather sell too soon and win than hold too long and lose. Guys, there is nothing worse than when you had an opportunity to cash in big and then you get greedy and you hold, and then you're like, well, I think it'll bounce back, and then it keeps dropping and then it keeps dropping, and then pretty soon you end up losing your profit window altogether. And so just because there's a profit available today doesn't mean that that profit's going to be there tomorrow, and it certainly doesn't mean that the card's going to rise even higher. Sometimes they will, but we don't know that. And that's where sometimes it's best to just take the win when it's there, lock it in, take that profit, and move on to the next one. On that note, remember, we don't need to retire on every single card, right? There's always another card out there. There's always that next card to win on too. So it's not like this is the last card you're ever going to sell. Just make the profit, be happy with it, and then, go pour the money back into the next one. It is okay to take profits when they're available. That is the goal. Let me remind you, to win on cards, to make money on cards. Okay. So if you can make a profit, it's okay to take that and just be happy with it. It's also possible to lose. And again, I've cautioned everyone on this before, but not all cards will rise. Guess what? It's not the end of the world if that happens. It's going to happen. And especially if we end up having to get to the point where we auction the card. So this is where if we can find even stronger deals during the buying season, that's going to give us the best chance to succeed. So if you happen to have this happen where you lose money on a card, just figure out, okay, what went wrong here? Why didn't this work? So that you can fix it the next time around and maybe make an adjustment as we look at the football buying season coming up, or basketball if you're into basketball, or certainly next year's baseball buying season. What would need to be different in order to win next time around? And then if we buy key cards of key players at the right time, again, the whole point of this is to understand that the upside tends to dramatically outweigh the downside. So even if we don't make a bunch of money, it's unlikely that the card is going to be dramatically lower heading into the new season than it was in December when everyone's focused on the holidays and focused on basketball and football. That all this attention is coming back. It almost doesn't make sense, right? On a lot of these kind of up and coming rising star caliber of players, especially for the cards to be lower heading into the season. So that's the whole play. We do the best we can with the information that we have available to make the best possible buys. And so it's not the end of the world. And by the way, if you lose on one card, that doesn't mean you can't still win on all of your other baseball inventory. So again, keep that big picture mindset here. It's also possible to win, and to win big too. And so this is what we're here for. This is what we've prepared for. This is what we were buying for. Now, as we get into this and we start seeing money coming in the door, let's share the wins in the community. Let's help each other out with, what's working, what players are on the rise, which ones aren't moving yet, and just keep an open dialogue about this. But guys, it is time to make it rain. This is one of my favorite times of the year. The more we get into the spring here, the more exciting it gets. You're going to start to feel this. And if you've not been through this before, and this is your first time, I'm so excited for you. If you've got good cards and you're ready to sell this stuff, you're going to have the inventory that people are looking for. And it's such a fun feeling when you're in the driver's seat there. there. And so I hope this helps take your strategy to the next level when you think about how to approach selling season. Now, if you're someone who's looking for help and you want to be a part of the conversation here and get around others that are also rolling out this strategy in real time, join us inside Ignite. It's my card investing community. We've got over 100 card investors learning, leveling up, winning together. This is one of the core strategies that we talk about, and we help each other with players, with stress testing ideas, with what types of cards are best suited for the seasonal swing strategy. And so if you're trying to get an advantage in this market and kind of get a leg up on this strategy before the next buying and selling season, come and join us. We'd love to help you out. I'll leave a link in the description if that sounds interesting at all, but otherwise we'll see you on the next video.